Before the headlines, before the silence, Emily Carter was just like anyone else. She was born in a small Ohio town, the second child of Thomas and Linda Carter. Her father was a high school history teacher, her mother a nurse who often worked double shifts at the local hospital. Emily grew up in a house where the dinner table was sacred, where even after the longest days, her parents insisted on gathering to eat together. Emily's childhood friends described her as the kind of girl who remembered everyone's favorite color. Not because she was nosy, but because she listened. She noticed details. She carried them with her. She graduated near the top of her class and chose Riverton State University not because it was prestigious, but because it was affordable and close enough to home for weekend visits. She majored in sociology, hoping to pursue social work. She wanted to be the kind of person who helped others untangle their problems. She was dependable, predictable even, and that's why her disappearance hit like a lightning strike. Because people like Emily don't just walk away. Tuesday, October 28, 2008, began like any other. Her roommate, Jessica, remembered Emily rising at 7:15 a.m. sharp. She showered, tied her hair in a loose ponytail, and slipped into a gray knit sweater and blue jeans. On her wrist, that silver bracelet from her younger brother caught the morning light. Over coffee, she laughed at Jessica's complaint about an upcoming chemistry exam. She even promised they'd order pizza that night as a kind of reward for surviving the day. It was such a normal conversation. And that's what makes it so haunting. By 9 a.m., Emily was out the door, backpack slung over her shoulder. She had a full day of lectures and study planned. She never liked to waste time. That was Emily, purposeful, steady, always a step ahead. The library cameras later confirmed her presence from 12:10 p.m. until 3:40 p.m. There she sat, surrounded by open books, scribbling notes in her spiral pad. The footage showed nothing unusual. She stretched, rubbed her eyes, even paused to sip water from her reusable bottle. At 3:40 she returned 2 books and checked out 2 more. The librarian, Mrs. Henderson, recalled the exchange clearly. She smiled like she always did. She was polite. There was nothing odd about her. Emily then adjusted her tote bag, pushed open the heavy glass doors, and stepped outside into the autumn air. It was the last time any camera would capture her alive. At 4:12 p.m., Emily entered Harris Market, a corner grocery with fading signage and buzzing fluorescent lights. It was the kind of store where everyone knew everyone. The cashier, a young man named Paul Rivera, remembered Emily vividly. She came in all the time, he later told police. Always bought the same kind of bread. That day she added apples and milk. She had exact change, even pulled coins from her pocket. Receipt timestamp, 4:17 p.m. Emily tucked the bag into her arm, waved politely and left. What happened next is still debated. The path home should have been straightforward. 3 blocks down Maple Avenue, past Ashford Street, then a left turn into her apartment building. A 5-minute walk. She never arrived. The timeline is brutally precise. 4:17 p.m., leaves Harris Market with groceries. 4:19 p.m., seen at the crosswalk by shopkeeper David Lynn. 4:21 p.m., dog walker Karen Holt insists she turned down an alley. 4:23 p.m., last phone ping recorded near Maple and Ashford. 4:25 p.m., expected home by her roommate. 6 minutes. Gone. David Lynn, who ran the hardware store across the street, swore he saw her. She was standing at the crosswalk looking at her phone, he testified. The light changed. She stepped forward. But then cars moved and I couldn't see her anymore. By the time I looked again, she wasn't there. Investigators pressed him. Did she cross? Did she turn? David shook his head. I don't know. I just know she was there one moment and not the next. His words became the first fracture in the timeline. Karen Holt, a 42-year-old woman walking her golden retriever, gave a different account. She turned into the alley, Karen insisted. I saw her clearly. She wasn't in a hurry. She walked like she knew exactly where she was going. But when police retraced the alley, they found nothing. No groceries, no signs of a struggle, no security cameras. Worse, Karen's statement conflicted directly with David's. Two people. Two stories. One truth missing. A third account came from Marcus Dean, a fellow student. He claimed he saw Emily continue straight toward her apartment. She was definitely ahead of me, he told investigators. Yet no camera along Maple Avenue captured her. The bakery's camera was broken. The laundromat's was aimed at the counter. The tailor's shop camera showed only empty pavement. 3 witnesses. 3 incompatible stories. And Emily? Nowhere. At 4:23 p.m., Emily's phone, a flip model popular at the time, went silent. Not switched off. Not drained. Silent. The signal vanished 2 blocks from her apartment. Cell tower records confirmed it. One moment she was on the network. The next gone. Her phone was never found. Perhaps the most unnerving detail, her groceries. Bread. Milk. Apples. Not a single item recovered. If she had been taken by force, why take the bag? Why not discard it? If she walked away willingly, why carry perishables into a disappearance? Detectives would later admit the missing grocery bag haunted them as much as her missing body. Maple Avenue was not remote. It was busy. Shops open. Cars at lights. Neighbors moving about. This was not a place for people to vanish unseen. And yet Emily Carter was erased on that very street. No one heard a scream. No one saw a struggle. No one found her books, her bag, or her milk. Nothing. Dear viewers, we expect disappearances in the wilderness. In shadows. On highways stretching into nothingness. But Emily vanished on a street where people laughed, bought bread, walked dogs. She vanished in the safest place she knew. And that is the true horror, because if safety can betray her, it can betray anyone. By that evening, whispers spread. Maybe she left willingly. But Emily had no history of running, no signs of depression, no hidden boyfriend. Maybe she was abducted. But how, in broad daylight with no witnesses? Maybe she walked into the alley. But then why leave no trace? Everyone had a theory. None explained the silence. 15 years later, a demolition crew would crack open a wall and reveal a room sealed in concrete. Inside, objects that should have been found long ago. But on October 28, 2008, all anyone knew was that Emily Carter walked out of Harris Market and into a mystery. By 4:30 p.m., Jessica Ramirez had already preheated the oven. 2 frozen pizzas sweated on the counter, their plastic sleeves peeled back like quiet promises. A laugh track from the tiny kitchen TV ricocheted off the tile. Nothing in the apartment matched the mood of the day, the world outside yawning toward dusk, the sky the color of wet concrete. They had a rule: Tuesdays were for decompression. Emily never missed it. 5:02 p.m., Jessica sent the first text. You close? I'll pop pizza in. 5:17 p.m., the second. 5:31 p.m., the third, shorter only because her heart had started to race. She called at 5:45 p.m. It rang once, then bounced to voicemail with a cheerful recording Emily had been meaning to change. Hey, it's Emily, leave it here. By 6:10 p.m., calls went straight to voicemail. No ring at all. Jessica tried not to think about what that meant. At 6:43 p.m., she was walking Maple Avenue in loops, 5 blocks out, 5 blocks back, stopping strangers, peering into recessed doorways, checking every trash can for a white grocery bag. She was not the sort of person who cried in public. Tonight she did, quietly, the way fear squeezes tears out of a person like water from cloth. At 7:11 p.m., the decision made itself. She dialed Linda Carter. The phone rang just once in the Carter home in Ohio. Linda answered on the inhale. Jessica? She should be home. Where is she? She should be home, Jessica repeated as if repetition could rewind time. By 7:30 p.m., Thomas and Linda were in their car. He drove like a man trying to outrun a tornado, white-knuckled, the speedometer flirting with illegality. Linda tapped the printout of directions against her thigh. Every traffic light was a provocation. Every slow driver a personal insult. On the dashboard, the digital clock punished them with minute-by-minute honesty. They didn't speak much. When they did, it was logistics. Call the police now. Send the photo I like. The one from the lake. Call Jessica every 30 minutes. Don't think. 5 hours to Riverton felt like a geography designed by cruelty. At 11:03 p.m., the desk sergeant at Riverton PD took down Emily's description with the thin, ambivalent concern of a man who has heard every story the night can generate. He typed as Jessica spoke, keys clacking in a rhythm that felt insultingly calm. Hair, brown. Height, 5'5". Clothing, gray sweater, jeans. Carrying, tote bag, small grocery bag. Last seen, Harris Market for 17 p.m. Phone, straight to voicemail since 6 p.m. She's an adult, he said, soft but flat, as if the words were policy and not a choice. Sometimes adults don't, Jessica said, her voice breaking for the first time. Don't finish that sentence. The sergeant hesitated, then nodded. He did not finish it. He entered the report, printed a copy, and promised an officer would follow up in the morning. Jessica walked home faster than she'd come, because going home slowly would feel like giving up. She didn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table and wrote the word missing across a plain sheet of printer paper, then Emily's name, then please call, and her number. She printed 20 copies and taped them to streetlights at 2 a.m. Wind snapped them flat. The city exhaled and took no notice. The Carters reached the apartment at 10:15 a.m. hollow-eyed, their marriage now a single organism pointed toward one shared purpose. Jessica hugged Linda so hard it folded both of them. Thomas surveyed the room like it was a crime scene, not because he expected to find anything, but because the act of looking was oxygen. At 11 a.m., Sergeant Michael Turner arrived with a uniformed officer and a clipboard. He was not unkind. He just wore the habit of containment like a coat. He asked to see Emily's room. He noted the bed made, the desk orderly, the mug in the sink rinsed but not stacked. He asked about medications, none. Boyfriends, no. Depression, no. Travel plans, no. Conflicts, no. Every no dropped like a pebble into a deep well where nothing splashed. At 12:05 p.m., they walked the route together. Apartment, Maple Avenue, Ashford Street, Harris Market. Turner listened, wrote, and kept his eyes moving the way trained people do. Awnings, alleys, reflective surfaces, anything that might have caught a trace. Inside Harris Market, the manager supplied the receipt for 4:17 p.m. The store's old camera watched the register and little else. The feed was a smudgy loop recorded to a VHS tape whose audio had long surrendered to static. Still, the footage showed Emily counting coins, smiling with that polite, habitual gratitude that makes strangers love you and remember you. Outside, Turner crossed to Lynn Hardware. David Lynn repeated his account. Crosswalk, phone, light changed, cars moved, lost sight. On the alley's mouth, they met Karen Holt and her golden retriever, Moose, who rolled on the sidewalk and lifted his head to study Turner's notebook. She turned into the alley, Karen said again. I swear. The way people do when they cut through between blocks. Like she knew it. Do you know her? Turner asked. No. I mean, everyone knows her face. The flyers. But no. What time? Karen looked at Moose as if his tongue might point to a clock. 4:20? 4:21? It was light. Did anyone follow her? Karen blinked slowly, rewinding inside her head. I don't remember anyone behind her. I remember a box truck, parked half on the curb. I thought how annoying it was. But that could have been later. Or earlier. She flinched. Maybe that was another day. Memory, obedient to panic, can become clay. At 1:30 p.m., 2 officers in blue windbreakers stepped into the alley with latex gloves and small flashlights, the way men enter caves looking for ghosts. It was a city alley, a long geometry of dumpsters peeling paint, water trickling from a downspout into a skinny river. The air smelled like old fruit and detergent. A side door behind the bakery was propped with a broken chair. A rear exit for a tailor hung crooked in its frame, a police lock and rusted red caps above it. They found nothing belonging to Emily. They found plenty that belonged to the alley. A broken umbrella rib, a cracked phone case minus its phone, the moony plaster face of a mannequin head someone had decapitated as a joke or a threat or both. The officers photographed everything anyway, each click an act of refusal, to let the city's entropy have the final word. A third officer lifted the grate on a gutter and aimed a light down the throat of the street. Black water winked and pretended to be innocent. No bag. No sweater fiber. No truth. Turner checked with the Public Works Department. Street sweeper had not passed through since Sunday. Trash pickup was Thursday mornings. It was Tuesday. If Emily had dropped anything, it should still be here. It wasn't. Back at the station, Turner had already initiated the routine requests. Call detail records, CDRs, from Emily's carrier, triangulation from the last pings. A tower dump was a reach this early, but he asked anyway because good detectives start by asking for forgiveness later. At 3:22 p.m. the carrier replied, "Last outgoing activity," a text to Jessica at 3:58 p.m., "On my way. Harris Market." Last network handshake, 4:23 and 27 seconds p.m., tower sector pointing southwest. Coverage umbrella reaching to the corner of Maple and Ashford and bleeding 2 blocks beyond. After that, nothing. Not even a phantom register. It didn't feel like a phone turned off. It felt like a phone encased, underground, inside concrete, or in the hands of someone who knew exactly where towers could not see. Turner wrote concealment in his notebook and underlined it once. By late afternoon, Emily's face had become a quiet part of the city's furniture. Her smile feathered in the wind on every light pole. Linda and Jessica canvassed with a stack of neon copies and a roll of clear tape that squeaked as it dispensed. Strangers accepted flyers with the same expression people wear at funerals, a kind of tender uselessness. Everyone wanted to help. No one knew how. At 4:40 p.m., a local reporter ambled up with a camera operator and the practiced softness of a man who turns strangers' grief into 1 minute 30 seconds at 6 and 11. "We're so sorry," he began. "We want to get the word out." He asked for a photo, a quote, a sound bite that could hold the weight of a life. Linda looked at the lens like it was a door she could step through to reach her daughter. "My daughter is not the kind of person who runs," she said. "She is the kind who runs toward people." The camera operator swallowed and pretended he didn't. The segment aired that night with the anchor's eyebrows arranged in compassionate geometry. It helped, people shared it. The algorithm of the city for a few hours favored Emily. By morning there were new headlines. Tips began arriving like static. Relentless, shapeless, unhelpful, punctuated by the occasional hiss you had to lean into to see if it was a signal. A woman in another state thought she saw Emily on a bus. A man claimed she matched a girl he'd met online. A self-proclaimed intuitive called to say Emily's aura was cloudy near water. The river ran along the east edge of the city. The entire map turned into an accusation. Turner triaged. He made the choices detectives make, knowing each choice might be the one they are later judged for. The call followed or the call ignored, a future headline waiting to ambush a past decision. At 10:10 a.m., a credible tip, cab 421. The driver, a man with a face arranged by decades of late nights, recalled a young woman with brown hair, a gray sweater, and a bag of groceries flagging him near the laundromat, around 4:20 p.m. "Where did you take her?" Turner asked. "Didn't," the driver said. "She asked if I took cards. I said no. She said she'd walk." He hesitated. She kept looking over her shoulder. Like she was being followed? Like she wanted to see someone she hoped was there. Or make sure someone wasn't. People look over their shoulder for both reasons. Turner pulled external camera requests for every storefront between Harris Market and the laundromat. Half were broken. 2 were fakes, domes with no lenses, theater props for security. 1 camera over the pharmacy door was real but angled at the cashier. Another captured the sidewalk at a perfect angle and overrode itself every 24 hours. Today was hour 25. Turner didn't sigh. He wrote it down because writing it down was the only power he had over the fact. Marcus Dean, the student who claimed to see Emily continue straight, arrived at the station in a hoodie with the school crest and the slightly defensive posture of someone who wants to be helpful but also fears he will be suspected. Turner put him in a small interview room and did what good cops do. He made the air gentle. "Tell me what you saw," Turner said. "I saw her pass the bakery," Marcus said. "I was on the other side of the street. She was ahead of me like, I don't know, 20 yards? I remember because she had a bag. Apples? I think I saw red through the plastic. Time? 4:20? Around there. Was anyone with her? No. I mean, lots of people were out. But she wasn't walking with anyone. Did she look back?" Marcus frowned, replaying the memory like a clip he could scrub back and forth with a mental thumbnail. "No. I think, no." "Tell me the shirt the man directly behind her was wearing," Turner said softly. Marcus blinked. "I don't." "That's okay," Turner said. "Most people don't notice. We build stories later from a few anchors. That's how the brain works." He said it like absolution, not accusation. He noted apples? And bag visible and no look back. 3 witnesses. 3 incompatible truths. One of them might be right. They might all be wrong. This was not helpful. It was the nature of human eyes. By the second evening, Riverton PD expanded to a formal search. Volunteers rallied at the community center. A detective with a map and a megaphone assigned grids. K9 units were brought in, hopeful and tragic, tails high, harnesses snug, the dog's joy at having a job smearing against the human sorrow of the job's purpose. Handlers offered Emily's sweater from her laundry basket. The dogs took in her scent with the reverent seriousness of priests receiving sacrament. They led walkers along Maple Avenue past Ashford to the alley, then, heartbreakingly, infuriatingly, lost the thread at the mouth of the street, where concrete and oil and last night's rain turned the ground into a neutral canvas. A second pass put noses to the base of a row of brick buildings 2 blocks down. One dog alerted at a doorway, pawing lightly, whining. The door belonged to a narrow commercial building with a boarded second story and a first-floor shop with for lease in sun-faded vinyl. The owner arrived with keys and an offended posture, the way men wear a fence to hide fear. Inside, dust, old shelving, a forgotten mop bucket, a calendar pinned to the wall still on June from some year no one remembered. Upstairs, plywood, a mattress whose history they did not want to imagine, a window wedged shut with paint. No Emily. No bag. No proof of anything except that the city collected secrets like lint. Turner logged the address. He logged the owner's name. He logged the permit history. Code violations from 2 years ago. Complaints about a smell that turned out to be a dead raccoon in the walls. He wrote it all down because sometimes the wrong detail becomes the right one when the clock finally decides to be merciful. He did not know that this address would matter again. The job is to behave as if it might. Searchers reached the river at dusk because water has a way of entering a case whether it deserves to or not. The east bank was cold, the reeds whispering that late October sound that is wind trying on winter. Divers are not called in on hour 45. Budgets frown on that. Instead, flashlights stuttered across the dark skin of the water. Men and women in volunteer vests scanned the banks for anything that did not belong. A jogger paused. His breath bent in the cooling air. "Are you looking for the girl?" he asked. No one had to ask which girl. He pointed upriver. "Yesterday I saw a black sedan pulled up over the curb by the park. Looked like someone was trying to hide it. But maybe I'm imagining it." Turner wrote it down. He wrote everything down. Black sedans are like commas. Everywhere you look. By the end of day 2, the story reached the second-tier news cycle. Not national, not viral, but the sort of story that anchors tease at the top and pay off with an earnest, practiced furrowed brow. A still of Emily under a headline, missing in daylight. A map graphic with a pulsing red dot. Footage of volunteers in neon vests, because the camera loves fluorescent colors. The comment sections became their own investigation. Half helpful, half cruel, all noise. People asked why Emily was alone, because we all are most of the time. They asked if she was depressed, she wasn't. They asked about an ex-boyfriend, there wasn't. They asked the question that vibrated at the center of all of them. How does a person vanish with witnesses? The answer was the same one that police always give and never want to. It happens all the time. The world is bigger than our eyes. At his desk, Turner began his wall. Detectives don't always use cork and string. Sometimes the wall is digital, sometimes it's only in the mind. Turner liked paper because paper does not crash. He pinned Emily's photo center, not the smiling school portrait the press used, but a candid from her mother's phone. Head tipped back, eyes mid-blink, the humanity alive in the awkwardness. He built outward. Timeline to the left, map to the right, witnesses clustered below like uneven satellites. Under map, he drew a rectangle and shaded 2 blocks around Maple and Ashford. He circled Harris Market in blue. He marked the alley in red. He penned a question mark beside the Furlise storefront. He wrote 423, phone dark, and underlined it twice. Above the alley he wrote a single sentence that would make him unpopular when it made him honest. If she went into the alley and was taken, either she screamed and no one heard, or no one heard because there was nowhere for sound to go. Nowhere for sound to go meant inside. Inside meant a room. Rooms meant doors. Doors meant locks. Locks meant someone else's key. He kept that sentence to himself. At the apartment, grief tried on all its disguises: anger, bargaining, delicate politeness, sudden laughter that fell to the floor half-formed. Linda folded and refolded a sweater from Emily's chair that did not need folding. Thomas made lists of lists. Call credit card companies. Call the registrar. Ask neighbors about any new contractors. Check bus stops. Bring an extra phone charger. The act of doing had to stand in for the act of saving, because the latter was not available. Jessica sat with Emily's spiral notebook and traced the indentations a pen leaves when writing hard, preparing for midterms. She read the rhythm of her roommate's mind in the thin handwriting, the way lines angled up when she was excited about an idea, the way they flattened when the material felt mechanical. She found a sticky note, folded once, with a grocery list in Emily's hand. Bread. Milk. Apples. Call mom. Jessica put the note in her pocket and did not show it to anyone, as if secrecy could generate a spell that would yield Emily in the doorway saying, "God, you guys. I lost my phone." At 8:11 p.m. on day 2, a uniform knocked at the apartment door with information that felt like a bruise pressed to see if it still hurt. Emily's debit card had been used at an ATM across town at 7:05 p.m. The footage showed a hooded figure, gender ambiguous in the way hoodies are, head down, hands quick. The balance inquiry showed no withdrawals, just the check. The card was then used at a convenience store for a $9 purchase. Turner drove there with a speed he would normally save for sirens. The clerk remembered the hood. He remembered the smallness of the person, but couldn't be sure if small meant female or teenager or simply poor posture. "What did they buy?" Turner asked. The clerk checked the register. "Duct tape," he said, then watched the detective's face with a squint meant to be apology. "And a candy bar." The footage quality was insultingly bad. A camera that had done 20 years and wanted retirement. Turner still printed a still. He still measured the subject's height against the sticker in the door frame used to estimate robbers. Between 5 feet 4 inches and 5 feet 7 inches. That was nothing. That was everyone. He called the bank. The card's physical mag stripe had been used. If the card had been stolen, it was in a hand now. At the apartment, Linda put both palms on the table and bent until her forehead touched wood. Thomas stared at the wall in a way that meant he was not seeing it. "This doesn't mean," Turner began and stopped. "Because sentences that begin with this doesn't mean end in lies spoken with good intentions." He changed it. "We don't know what it means yet." Back at his wall, Turner added ATM 7:05 p.m., East Side. He drew a dotted line and wrote unknown. He should have felt momentum, he felt math. He stared at the map until streets blurred into lattices. He widened his rectangle. He tapped his pen at the alley. He tapped his pen at the for lease sign. He tapped his pen at the code violations line he'd written earlier. He pulled the city's permitting portal. The for lease building's second floor had been cited for an improperly sealed maintenance closet 12 months prior, repaired on paper, inspected on paper, closed on paper. People forget that paper is only as honest as the last person who touched it. He printed the record and circled the inspector's name in pencil. Not because he suspected the man, because names matter when the world tries to be faceless. He slid the file into a manila folder and wrote side addresses on the tab. He told himself he was not foreshadowing anything. He told himself he was just doing his job. At 3 a.m. the city performed its favorite trick, pretending nothing bad ever happens while people sleep. The streets took on their middle-of-the-night clarity, when every light is lonely and every sound has an echo. A patrol car idled at the corner of Maple and Ashford because sometimes the mere presence of the law is a rope thrown into the dark. In the apartment, Linda slept in Emily's bed with her shoes on. Thomas dozed in a chair with a coat over him like a shrug. Jessica lay awake and listened to the building breathe. Somewhere on the floor above them, water thumped through old pipes like a slow heartbeat. She got up and made tea and did not drink it. She stared at the cup until the surface cooled and a dusty skin formed, and then she poured it out because she could not tolerate anything in the apartment that had settled. On the counter, 2 frozen pizzas still sweated in their sleeves. At 9 a.m., a volunteer named Evan, young, earnest, the kind of helpful that makes mothers want to hug him, arrived with a box of clipboards, highlighters, and more printer paper. He had taken it upon himself to organize a second wave of canvassing. He'd made a spreadsheet. He had color codes. It was a gift. You learned to accept gifts without interrogating them. Teams fanned out with a script. "Hi, we're looking for Emily Carter. Did your cameras catch anything between 4 and 5 on Tuesday?" They learned the landscape of the neighborhood's memory. What people remembered, what they invented, what they were ashamed to say and finally did. At a pawn shop 2 blocks north, a man with the look of permanent skepticism said he'd seen a young woman with a gray sweater the night before, but then appended a shrug that absolved him of being believed. At the barber, the clippers paused as everyone turned their heads. At the bakery, a young employee cried because she remembered Emily buying a muffin last week and felt, absurdly, as if she should have given it to her for free. In the afternoon, Linda insisted on retracing the route again. Mothers believe in rituals because rituals offer the illusion of control. She walked Maple with Thomas at her side and Jessica half a step behind, as if the formation mattered. At the alley's mouth, Linda stopped and stared down its length, as if looking long enough could force her child to materialize. She stepped into the shadow, felt the temperature dip, and came back out as if she'd been burned. "Not there," she said. She didn't go there. Turner didn't contradict her. He knew a mother's certainty was neither evidence nor ignorable. At 3:10 p.m., Turner's desk phone rang with a number he didn't recognize and a tone his body did. He answered in a voice trained to be a sponge. "We found a purse." "The park?" A maintenance worker cleaning a culvert had pulled a mud-smeared handbag from the reeds. Inside, a student ID, a wallet with cards, one missing, a crumpled store receipt, Harris Market for 17 p.m., a lip balm, and, this is the kind of detail that undoes fathers, a photograph, Emily with her younger brother at a county fair, sunburn blooming on both their noses, a stuffed bear between them like a shared trophy. Turner did what the job requires. He touched nothing, called for evidence tech, taped and bagged and labeled, logged the chain with the care of a man who has learned that courts do not forgive sloppy bravery. He called the family to tell them what he could tell and what he could not. He waited while grief performed its choreography on the other end of the line. He drew a line on his map from Maple and Ashford to the park culvert and penciled water path. He knew purses travel when people don't. He knew throwing a purse in water was either panic or theater. He wrote theater and underlined it once. At 6:20 p.m., a man arrived with the particular confidence of someone about to offer the story that saves the day. He introduced himself as Gordon and said he'd seen Emily at a bus stop talking to a man in a baseball cap. He offered detail after detail. The cap was navy, the sneakers had a red stripe, the bus was the 14 eastbound, the ad on the bench was for a dentist with an unfortunate smile. Turner's heart did the thing trained hearts do. It rose and then stayed leashed. He asked the right questions. He compared the bus schedule to the time Gordon claimed and discovered that the 14 eastbound had not run at that time on that day due to a detour for a water main break. Gordon's details were perfect for Monday. Memory is not a liar, it is a magician. It selects, substitutes, and sells. Turner thanked him anyway. He took the wrong story into the right folder because sometimes a wrong story becomes a right one later by accident, and because dismissing a citizen's effort is a luxury police can't afford. By the time the third night arrived, the case had the feeling anyone who has worked these cases knows too well. The cold edge at the perimeter of everything, the sense that whatever heat there was would now come from friction. People pushing, people insisting, people refusing to let the thing freeze. Turner stood once more at the mouth of the alley. He listened the way you listen to a shell for the sea. Refrigeration units hummed behind a restaurant. A bottle rolled and tapped against brick in some invisible wind. Somewhere, an upstairs television laughed at a joke no one in the alley was invited to hear. He paced the length and counted doors. Bakery, tailor, vacant storefront, a locked steel door with utility stenciled faintly, a grease-slicked back entrance for a diner, a narrow iron door with no knob, just a keyway the size of a thumbnail. He jotted keyed from outside and took a photo, flash fracturing the darkness for a 3-inch square of time. He told himself he was being thorough, not prophetic. He told himself any city has doors that people forget until they remember too late. Day 3 closed with a small, stubborn accumulation of nouns and no verbs. A purse. A culvert. An ATM still with a hood. A dog that pawed a door for reasons that might be canine whimsy or awful truth. A mother who looked down an alley and said not there with holy certainty. At his desk, Turner peeled a post-it from its pad, wrote just 2 words, and stuck it above the map where his eyes would find it every morning before the coffee did. Keep digging. He turned off his lamp and the wall went into silhouette, a geometry of paper and thread that, in the dark, looked like a floor plan. Far across town, on a block where for lease decals yellowed, a building slept with the heavy, unconcerned sleep of brick. Behind one of its many doors, at the end of a corridor people forgot to count, a rectangle of space was shut away from air and time. It would take years to open it. But for now, its existence was a pressure in the map that no one could yet feel. And on Maple Avenue the alley exhaled. The city took back the night. Somewhere, a clock rolled over to the next hour and the next. Day 10. The posters had creases now. Staples had rust rings. The bright neon of missing softened under weather and apathy until the city could look right at Emily's face and not feel pierced by it. The news cycle did what it was built to do. Move. There were budget hearings, a warehouse fire, a mayoral primary. Emily's segment slid from the lead to the middle, from the middle to the back half, from the back half to a line of crawl text almost no one read. Dear viewers, Lost doesn't start with answers failing to appear. It starts when questions stop being asked. Sergeant Michael Turner felt the shift as pressure in the room rather than words in a meeting. It was the way supervisors said we'll revisit and meant we won't. It was the way the chalkboard of weekly priorities erased CAR, Emily Carter, and replaced it with burglaries that had video and suspects that had names. But he wasn't done. He still had a wall. He still had pins. He still had that sentence he would not say aloud. If she went inside, someone opened the door. Remember the dog walkers, maybe? A box truck half on the curb? It was nothing and everything. Turner squeezed it for whatever oxygen it could give. He canvassed repair shops, rental counters, parcel depots. He asked for logs, for manifests, for the kind of scribbled daybook entries small outfits still kept by habit. A pawn shop's old exterior camera, a gift from the decade before, caught 6 seconds of white. A cube van easing past the corner, faded blue lettering, the last characters of a phone number scissored by time. 73. He froze the frame. Squinted. Printed. Under a smear of grime, ghost letters surfaced when the contrast was pushed. Harb and S. Harbor and Sons? Harbor and Steel? Harbor and something. He made a list of every harbor within 50 miles. He made the calls no one wanted to return. 3 came back. A plumbing company, a cabinet fabricator, a demolition contractor that had been acquired, renamed, and, for legal purposes, ceased to exist. Demolition. Turner circled it. He cross-referenced permit records for work anywhere near Maple and Ashford the week Emily vanished. 1 hit. A temporary occupancy inspection at the narrow building with the for lease decal. The upstairs had been stabilized, the file said. The last sign-off, R. Colton Inspector. The date, the Friday after Emily vanished. He pulled the inspector roster. Colton was on sick leave that entire week. Dear viewers, sometimes a case doesn't fall apart because there's no thread. It falls apart because paper lies and no one thinks to ask it why. Turner drove to Building and Safety with the file tucked under his arm like contraband. A clerk with the weary kindness of a public servant in a place that never sleeps remembered the day vaguely. A contractor came in angry, in a hurry, wanting the sign-off documented so the space could be shown to a tenant. I remember because he smelled like solvent, she said, wrinkling her nose. Stays with you. Name? Turner asked. She tapped the screen. The company on the form was Larkhill Redevelopment Partners. Foreman's signature is E. Bram. The landlord's name on the lease flyer was Elliot Bram. Turner's pen slowed. And Colton? The clerk clicked deeper, frowned. We had a temp inspector stamp a bunch of routine closures that week. It was supposed to be only non-structural, checking off paperwork people had already satisfied. The stamp used was Colton's. We got a reprimand for it. Who was the temp? She checked. No employee by that name on record. Looks like a day labor hire routed through Larkhill, not through us. That's not how it's supposed to work. Turner scanned the file again. Maintenance closet sealed. Access panel corrected. Photographs, none. Reinspection, not required. He felt the now familiar chill, not from a ghost but from the bureaucratic draft under a door someone swore was shut. He requested the whole folder, front to back, and paid personally for the copies because sometimes a case survives on the indignities you absorb for it. Elliot Bram wore wealth like cologne, a little too much, meant to be noticed. He met Turner in the shadowed lobby of the for lease building and unfurled a smile the way men do when they think charm is Teflon. Inspector, Bram said, misnaming him on purpose. Sergeant, Turner corrected, not accepting the handshake. About your upstairs. Code complaint from last year, Bram said breezily. A closet, some drywall. We fixed it. Sign-off says sealed. Sealed why? Access, you know. Old buildings have weird gaps. Pes. Tenants don't like holes. Holes in what? Bram gestured vaguely upward, a magician's wave over a hat he swore was empty. Walls. Floors. Come on, Sergeant, this place is clean. Turner's gaze snagged on a stair that had a new squeak where old wood shouldn't. He noted fresh paint that stopped an inch before a baseboard, a brush line like a lie that didn't commit. He asked to see the corrected closet. Bram produced keys, walked them up the narrow flight, and opened a door onto the kind of room you show quickly and then close faster. Plywood floor, one dusty light, the smell of lemon cleaner failing to erase something mineral. He put his palm on the drywall. Cool. Why the rush on your sign-off? Turner asked. Market's hot, Bram said. Gotta move. You gonna hold me up on a closet? Turner didn't answer. He was staring at a section of wall that had too few screw pops for its size, as if the sheet hadn't been fastened the way a lazy carpenter would do it, but carefully, deliberately, like someone didn't want the seams to show. He asked for permits. Bram produced them. He asked for the name of the foreman. Bram said he'd have to check. He asked for the last crew on site. Bram said he cycled vendors all the time. The meeting ended when it had to, which is to say, when Bram made it clear he thought it should. Turner left with nothing admissible and a pocket full of facts that felt like splinters under skin. Evidence is a clock. The purse from the culvert should have rung like an alarm. Backlog rang first. A rust flake lodged in the purse's zipper teeth went to the state lab with a dozen other items in a banker's box. The scrap of a fabric thread that might be from a glove, the smear on the receipt edge that might be oil, the microscopic grit that clung to the corner of the student ID. Labs are triage centers. Homicides first, then assaults, then whatever's left for the month if the month has room. When the rust report did come back, it spoke in specificity that should have mattered. The composition and pigment profile matched industrial enamel used on mid-range commercial steel doors, the kind you find on pop-out service exits and behind-the-scenes utility rooms. Turner wrote steel service door and drew an arrow to alley doors. He went back and photographed every steel door in a 2-block radius, making a catalog no one asked for. He ran a magnet along frames hoping for the lazy iron dust left by sloppy hinge work. He found none. He asked the lab to prioritize the grease stain on the receipt. It returned like an insult 3 weeks later. Animal fat. From the alley behind the diner, most likely. It didn't prove Emily had gone there. It proved the wind had. We always go back to the hooded figure. That convenient anonymity. That height bracket that is nearly every adult American. Turner enlarged the still until pixels broke apart and became square fields. He mapped posture, shoulder slope, the angle of a wrist that might be female only in the bias of the viewer. He checked the convenience store's other camera, the exterior dome. The feed had died 6 months earlier. A sticker on the lens read protected. The lie embarrassed no one but the people who needed truth. Still, he cross-matched the timestamp with transit smart card pings, with city traffic cams that kept only 72 hours of feed, with ride-hail records subpoenaed and stalled and finally delivered with pages blacked out because companies love privacy until policing threatens their brand. He found 5 hoods, 7 caps, 10 people who could be anyone if a story demanded them to be. He did not find Emily. On day 28 there was the meeting. There is always the meeting. A conference room with cheap coffee and harsh light. A commander who didn't dislike Turner, which was worse than an enemy because you don't see the shove coming from a friend. Sergeant, the commander began, eyes already scanning the next line item. Status on Carter. Active canvass ongoing, Turner said. Lab results partial. Several administrative anomalies on a building 2 blocks from last ping. I'd like consent to push for a warrant too. A warrant for what? The city attorney interrupted softly from the back row, and on what probable cause? Turner laid it out crisp. The temp inspector, the misuse of a stamp, the rush to close out an upstairs closet, the dog's interest at that very building, the landlord's foreman name that was also his own. It's smoke, the attorney said not unkindly. Not fire. Turner swallowed heat. Sometimes the fire is behind the wall. Silence. The room has little patience for metaphors when budgets sit in chairs. Give it 2 more weeks, the commander said. Then we reallocate. You'll maintain as lead, but we move bodies to the burglary's uptick. 2 more weeks is a bureaucratic way of saying we're already done. When the city moves on, you need someone who doesn't. That someone turned out to be Maya Loren, a reporter whose station rarely let her run long but who did her homework anyway. She filed public records requests, not just for the inspection but for the code complaint that came before it, the phone logs between Larkhill and Building and Safety, the parking tickets on the block the day the box truck drifted past. Her editor killed the story twice for lack of narrative energy. She published a blog post anyway, the kind that lives on the station's site like a forgotten room. Not on air, not promoted, but there. In it, buried 3 paragraphs down, she noted a detail no one else was interested in. Inspector Colton's badge number was used on 2 sign-offs that week while he was on leave. Both involved sealed spaces. Both touched properties controlled, directly or through Shell, by Elliot Bram. Maya sent Turner the link at 2:11 a.m. Thought you'd want this. He read it 3 times and added it to his wall with a pushpin that bent before it bit. He wrote Colton Badge and Bram X2 and circled them both until the paper fuzzed. Dear viewers, sometimes the thread is visible. Sometimes everyone is just too tired to pull. By December, the Carters were back in Ohio physically but in Riverton still in every way that mattered. Their living room became a shipping center. Posters rolled into tubes, envelopes licked, stamps smoothed flat with the edge of a spoon. Linda kept a journal of every call placed, every tip logged, every person who promised to pass the word. Their church held a vigil that made the local paper 2 towns over. Thomas spoke once and he said only this: if you saw something small, say it. Little things are the ones that save people. The phone rang often and not at all. The kind of ringing that brings no one in from the cold. The rubber stamp is administrative, not moral. It says inactive in red because some designer decided red would make clerks pay attention. It was applied to Emily's case file on day 63 with the practiced neutrality of a machine. Turner hated the word for what it did to the eyes of people who read it. It told them the story was over when the story had simply refused to meet their deadline. He wrote active on the inside cover in pencil. He kept a copy of the jacket in his desk and a copy at home in a drawer no one else opened. He carried a key for the Faceless building on his ring now, not because Bram gave him one but because locksmiths are citizens too and sometimes citizens believe in constellations. He didn't use it. He told himself he was not ready to be wrong. There are details that refuse to behave. One arrived courtesy of a teenager with a spray can and a YouTube channel with 49 subscribers. The kid broke into the Faceless building in March to film himself in grainy bravado. He panned his phone across the upstairs hallway and laughed at a mattress. He rapped quietly to a beat in his head. Then, almost as an afterthought, he knocked on a section of wall and said, "Hollow, like a secret." He got 32 views. The algorithm did not care. The city did not care. The comment section was 2 bots and a friend. Maya cared. She sent the link at 1:03 a.m. Turner watched it twice, then again without sound, then again with his ear practically on the speaker when the knock came. He felt it, that weird vertebral sense of air behind something solid, the echo you only hear if you've been listening for months. He wrote "Hollow" on a sticky and pressed it to the file. He put in for a warrant again, and the city attorney wrote back, "Insufficient cause." He went to Bram with the video. Bram said YouTube is full of kids who think everything is a tunnel. Turner didn't break the law. He didn't break the wall. He did what the job's oath demands, waited for enough truth to make action legal. He also did what men do when the law is trying to be careful while time is trying to be cruel. He kept coming back, alone, standing in that hallway, breathing in the lemon cleaner and the mineral beneath, palm flat to paint, feeling for a draft that wouldn't commit. Let's return briefly to the alley. To the iron door with no knob, only a keyway. Turner had photographed it in October. In March it was repainted. The fresh coat looked like any fresh coat until you placed the 2 photos side by side. In the first, a hairline crack at the frame's base. In the second, no crack. Either a repair or a cover. He ran the door's serial plate, the tiny stamped numbers no one ever sees, through the manufacturer. The order had been placed 7 years earlier by Harbor and Steel, an ironworks that, on paper, had become Larkhill Fabrication. He called the old number. Disconnected. He called the new number. Voicemail with a cheerful message and a full inbox. He circled back to the clerk at Building and Safety. "Who signed the delivery for that door?" he asked. She found an email, delivered to rear alley, signature illegible, receiver insisted on rush install. Rush to install a service door no tenant had been inside to complain about. Rush to seal a closet upstairs. Rush to close a file with a sick inspector's stamp. Dear viewers, sometimes a city tells you its story in whispers. You don't need to be a detective to hear it. You only need to decide that whispers count. On his wall map, Turner drew a rectangle around the for-lease building so heavy the paper thinned. He added dotted arrows, alley to iron door, stair to closet, closet to the section the kid had knocked. He wrote air in the margin and underlined it until the pen threatened to bleed through. He thought about the purse in the culvert, the ATM hood, the box truck, the false inspector, the landlord with solvent on his cuffs. All of it could be coincidence. The worst cases always are. A lattice of almost that never quite intersect until you take a hammer to the right spot and watch a wall turn into a hinge. He didn't have the hammer. Not yet. Spring came on like an apology, soft light, damp ground, the city's trees making a show of pretending winter hadn't taken anything. In a rental office 2 neighborhoods away, Elliot Bram signed a term sheet with a developer who specialized in adaptive reuse. Demolition wasn't on the plan. Selective interior removal was. 15 years from now, workers would crack a closet that wasn't, peel back drywall that wasn't meant to be opened, and step into a sealed concrete room the city had walked past for a decade and a half. They would find what should have been found in the first month: a chair scarred by rope, a bag of apples mummified to brown stone, a student ID caked in thin dust, a steel door on the alley side whose hinges had been painted to look old when they were new. Sergeant Turner in a quiet hallway, palm on a wall that breathes, a landlord who smiles too easily, a file jacket stamped inactive in red like a wound, a teenager's video that nobody watched, an inspector's name on a line he didn't sign, and a city that stopped asking questions just before the answers were ready to speak. The first vigil was small enough to fit inside a single photograph. 10 people at the corner of Maple and Ashford, the wind threatening their flames, the traffic pretending not to notice. Linda Carter stood at the front with a copy of Emily's photo laminated against the weather, Thomas at her side holding a thermos no one would drink from. Jessica pressed flyers into hands that already had them. A pastor said a prayer that tried to be big enough. A student read a poem that did its best. A reporter angled for a shot that would survive the evening broadcast. When it ended, no one moved. Grief has momentum. Stopping is the hardest part. Linda lifted her chin and said the sentence that would follow every story from this night forward. Silence helps the guilty. It was not dramatic. It was surgical. She said it like an equation and the crowd repeated it back, as if saying it together could make the city hear. They said it again the next week and the next. Candles learned the corners of that intersection. Wax marked the cracks in the sidewalk like timid constellations. Silence helps the guilty moved from a vigil sentence to a strategy. It appeared in the footer of flyers. On the back of handbills. Sharpened on yard signs that trembled in the winter wind. A volunteer screen printed it onto black t-shirts until the ink stained his fingers permanently gray. Linda wrote it at the top of every email and every letter she mailed certified, to the mayor, to the council, to building and safety, to anyone whose name sat on letterhead near the place where answers sleep. She signed each with the same closing: I will not be quiet for you. Please do not be quiet for my daughter. Whenever cameras came, she said the line first thing before the questions, before the mic found its place. Reporters love a sentence that can hold a headline. This one held a purpose. Maya Loren taught the Carters a new alphabet: FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests, state equivalents, municipal records. Forms that asked questions. Fees that punished urgency. Clocks that ticked in 30-day increments. The Carters learned to date stamp everything, to log responses in a binder with tabs that multiplied like grief. The first wave came back with rectangles of black ink where truth should have been. Redactions glared like empty doorways. Linda ran her finger along the blackout and read the silence aloud as if it were text. She and Maya learned the shape of what had been removed by the seams left behind. One packet mattered more than the rest: the inspection log for the Faceless building and the email trail between Larkhill Redevelopment Partners and Building and Safety. You could build a timeline with what little they allowed. October 29, 2008, 7:42 a.m. Need to close upstairs item. Tenant showing Friday. October 30, 2008, 11:13 a.m. Temp inspector available today. October 30, 2008, 3:22 p.m. Stamped. Thanks. Stamp with whose hand? Colton, sick that week, remember? The signature was a smear that could be anyone. The initials matched a stamp, not a person. The city later called it a clerical accommodation. Linda called it by its real name, permission. Maya appealed the redactions. The city released one more line, an orphan of a sentence that wandered into the light. Selective interior removal complete. Removal of what, exactly? And why would removal be selective unless there was something in the interior that needed choosing? The Carters' kitchen became a small war room. On the wall, a calendar with vigil encircled every Tuesday. On the table, a laptop that never slept, piles of envelopes, checklists, a printer that panted like an old dog. Thomas, who had taught high school history for 25 years, turned notes into a timeline so clean a jury could have followed it. He spoke little, but when he did, the room listened. He drew 3 lines on butcher paper. Emily's confirmed timeline. B. The city's paperwork timeline. C. The landlord's construction timeline. Where they overlapped, he shaded dark. Where they ran parallel without touching, he drew arrows labeled Ask Why. He taped the butcher paper above the coffee maker. When anyone came to the apartment, to drop off flyers, to sit with Linda, to offer bad ideas that felt like help, they had to face the lines. It made their grief behave like work. At a city council meeting in February, Linda stood during public comment and used her 2 minutes like a blade. My daughter walked down Maple Avenue at 4:17, she said into the mic that was too short by an inch, forcing her to bow slightly as if to the bureaucracy itself. At 4:23 her phone fell silent. After that, your systems went louder than the truth. A building 2 blocks away closed a file with a sick man's stamp. Your office redacted the word selective and expected that to be enough. It isn't. Silence helps the guilty. A ripple moved through the chamber the way wind moves wheat. Counselors adjusted their pens. The city attorney looked at his shoes. Someone clapped and was shushed by the sergeant-at-arms. Sergeant Turner sat in the back row in plain clothes and let the words land. He did not clap. He did not look at the commander 3 seats down. He stared at the aisle carpet and felt the old steady anger, righteous not wild, push his pulse forward. When it ended, he didn't catch Linda. He didn't have to. She was already walking toward the hallway where cameras waited for a sentence the city could not redact. It came from a place tips rarely come from, a Union Hall 2 neighborhoods south. A drywall hanger named Luis Ortega had taken a second job that week in 2008, cash no questions, on the second floor of a narrow building that smelled like lemon cleaner and old metal. He remembered because the foreman insisted the crew arrive after hours and leave everything cleaner than they found it. We hung 2 sheets where there was a gap, he told Maya and Turner in a joint interview 15 months after Emily vanished, palms sweating onto a foam cup of coffee. No studs. Just, like someone had already framed something behind. We were told not to ask. We taped tight. Then a guy came behind us with joint compound who wasn't one of ours. Name? Turner asked. Luis shrugged. He paid cash. I didn't want to know. Date? He thought. End of October. A Thursday. Night. October 30th, 2008, 3:22 p.m., stamped. Thanks. What did the door look like? Maya asked. Luis blinked. What door? The one they didn't want you to touch. He frowned. We didn't see a door. Because if you encase a door in concrete and then hide the concrete behind drywall, there is no door. Not yet. Only a plan. Turner typed the statement himself, slow, ensuring every syllable sat where evidence could find it later. He submitted for a warrant with Luis's declaration attached, the temp inspector nonsense stapled behind it, the dog alert, the box truck clip, the clerk's solvent memory, the redacted emails that had given up their one useful verb, removal. The judge wrote 2 words in an elegant hand that made denial look polite. Insufficient nexus. The law wants certainty. Predators want time. They make an exquisite couple. When the law refused to open the wall, the community decided to walk through it. Jessica organized an action with students and neighbors. They called it Walk the Path, from Harris Market to the crosswalk past the alley, pausing at the iron door with no knob, and ending beneath the second-floor window of the Faceless building. Children chalked footprints on the pavement, white outlines curling around corners, climbing in chalk logic straight up the wall where footsteps can't go. The march moved silent except for a drum that kept a heartbeat and the friction of shoes. People placed apples on the steps in a small, defiant ritual that felt like an answer to the grocery bag that never came home. Local news covered it because cameras love movement. The live shot captured something stillness never could. How many people refused to forget? How many people turned their bodies into arrows pointed at a building that wanted to be a blank? Bram stood a half block away in a coat that cost too much and smiled like he was above weather. The smile didn't reach his eyes. He left before the drum stopped. Silence helps the guilty, Linda said into a bullhorn that made every word rattle. But we will not be quiet. We will not be quiet, the crowd answered. Selective. Interior. Removal. Selective. Interior. Removal. Who stamped the paper? Not Colton. Who opened the door? Someone with a key. A chant does not open walls. It does something else. It grinds down the story's edges until the truth has fewer places to hide. Turner watched from across the street, coat collar up, pen in pocket as if a warrant might fall into it if he stood just right. Maya kept pulling threads. A quiet accountant at Larkhill, laid off in the downturn, answered an email no one expected him to. He attached a ledger with petty cash disbursements for the week after Emily vanished. $1,200, night work/finish, $300, inspect assist, $180, cleaning supplies/solvent. Solvent. The clerk's memory of the smell. The lemon cleaner trying to erase something not lemon at all. The accountant refused to go on camera. He refused to sign an affidavit. He had a mortgage and a daughter at a school that cost what honesty can't afford. He hit send, then unplugged his laptop and called it a night. Maya printed the ledger and slid it across Turner's desk. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He circled the line items and wrote who got paid in letters large enough to force his own attention. It still wasn't enough. The law wanted a body or a sound or a neighbor who heard a scream and wrote it down. The city wanted quiet. One night in January, frost bit the Faceless building so hard that the iron door contracted and popped against its frame with a sound like a knuckle cracking. A passerby posted on a neighborhood forum, "Weird bang at Bram's ghost building. Anyone else here?" The thread devolved into complaints about parking and an argument about property taxes. Information is always trying to tell us its name, we are always telling it ours instead. Turner logged the post anyway. He asked a patrol to add extra drive-bys. He asked the city attorney again for a warrant. He received again a paragraph that used many words to say no. At home, he pulled Emily's file out of the drawer he had dedicated to refusing to forget. He reread the first page because that's what you do when you can't move the last one. You return to the beginning and look for a sentence you missed. He found nothing new. He closed the file like you close a door you plan to come back through. Grief writes new rules. Linda's had 3. No candle goes out before the hour. No Tuesday without a vigil. No microphone without the sentence, "Silence helps the guilty." She added a 4th in the spring, knock. Whenever she passed a blank wall, a door with no knob, a stairwell that smelled of cleaner more than it should, she knocked. Once, lightly, so as not to frighten herself with an echo. Then twice so as not to be cowardly. She taught the volunteers to do it, on properties with permission, on empty storefronts whose landlords never returned calls. Little knuckles made little sounds. In a city that had tried to forget her daughter, Linda made sure the city heard someone was still there. It nearly happened in year 2. A small fire broke out in the rear of the Faceless building. Faulty wiring in the diner kitchen chased flame up a vent. Smoke didn't discriminate, it found the second-floor corridor and took a breath. Firefighters blew the door and sprayed the ceiling, then ventilated with fans that made every loose scrap of paper perform a small dance. One firefighter, mask up, leaned against a stretch of drywall while catching his breath and said a thing he didn't write down because it didn't feel like the kind of thing that belongs in a log. "Feels hollow here." He thumped it with the heel of his glove. "Think. Different." He thumped a foot left. "Normal."